Hey everybody, it's Dana. Welcome back to day 4 of the video card series for 2018. We are going to be using this cute little stamp set from Avery Elle called Love is in the Air. And I love this stamp set because it has some solid images and it also has some outline images. And it's just really cute even if it's not a Valentine's Day card. So I'm going to do a little bit of watercoloring today. So the paper that I have right here is the Tim Holtz Ranger watercolor paper that you can find in the pack. I believe there's like 25 sheets in the pack that you can pick up from Hobby Lobby, Michael's, or you can actually pick it up online as well. So I'm using the larger heart, which actually looks like a heart balloon. And I'm also going to grab out a few of the clouds. Now, what I like about this stamp set is if you didn't want to color anything, these images are solid. So you can just go ahead and grab out your ink pads and stamp out the images, and you didn't have to worry about coloring anything. So this can be a really quick card and not having to worry about pulling out any markers or anything like that. So I'm going to go ahead and line up my clouds and my very big heart onto this watercolor paper. And I'm going to close the lid of my Misty and we're going to go ahead and get started. So for my ink today, because I'm going to be heat embossing this, I'm going to use some Versamark. Now, before I go ahead and get started, I quickly remembered that I wanted to use my embossing buddy on this because I did not want to have my embossing powder everywhere on this paper a little bit later. So I went and grabbed my embossing buddy to make sure I get all the static off my paper. Now I'm going to go ahead and start inking up these images. Now these images are quite large, so you want to make sure that you ink them up very well. In my case, I don't want to ink them up perfectly. I want to leave some areas right in the middle of the heart that does not have a lot of ink on it. So I'm like very gingerly, you can't really tell in the video, missing kind of the middle area. I don't want a lot of ink on that middle area, but I do want it around the edges. And you'll be able to see once I start putting on the embossing powder that I kind of missed a few areas right in the middle. So I'm just going to put on some white embossing powder, and here you can really see how I miss those areas. And that I did intentionally because I want to do a color right in the middle of my heart. So I'm just going to tap off some of that excess embossing powder, and I'm really glad I used my embossing buddy on this to make sure I didn't have any of the extra white embossing powder stuck on my paper. And that looks pretty good. I think I have everything else done, but you can definitely see right there that I don't have those spots done. And that is exactly what I was going for here because I want to add a color right in the middle of that heart. So now I'm going to go ahead and melt back my embossing. And you guys have seen this done a million times, so I'm not going to let you sit here and wait for this embossing powder to dry. I'm just going to go ahead and let that work its magic, and then we're going to go ahead and get busy on the watercoloring. So now since that's dried, I'm going to grab my board and my favorite tape. This is Artist masking tape, and it seems to be my favorite tape. And I'm going to go ahead and tape that down to my board. Now, I got a question, an email asking me where I got this board from. This board is from IKEA, but you can pick one up at Ross or Walmart. You just want to get a inexpensive, and I'm going to repeat that, inexpensive board if you want to have something with a handle on it when you watercolor to kind of tilt your water. Don't buy anything overly expensive, you guys, because you're just using it to paint with. So now since I've tack down my paper so it doesn't warp, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I have 2 containers of water here, and I have a palette of Daniel Smith watercolor paint here. Now, you do not have to use Daniel Smith watercolor paint. I just happen to be part of a group, and I got a really great buy on these, but You can use any watercolor paint that you have. I'm just going to go ahead and use this palette because I really, really love some of the colors in this palette. So I'm going to start down with this gorgeous blue, and I'm going to start adding just some water to my palette first to get the color I want. And then I'm going to come in with a larger brush to add some water to the background of my paper because I want my paper to be really wet. So that's why I have the 2 containers of water, because I didn't want to come in with that blue water onto the background of my paper. So that's why I have 2 containers of water. So I put the clean water on to make sure that my paper is really, really wet. And now I can go ahead and start coming in with that larger paintbrush and start adding in that color. Now I will link below what color this is in the Daniel Smith palette, but it's just such a beautiful blue. And anytime I'm watercoloring, this seems to be like the blue I always have a tendency to go to. So I'm just going to put that down, and I'm being very mindful to not really go over my heart too much. I don't mind going over the clouds, but I'm really being mindful not to go over my heart. I'm just laying down a very nice base coat of this color. And now with this watercolor, it is going to dry back softer. So this sky is not going to be as dark, but it is going to be a very pretty blue. So I started with a darker color because I do know it is going to dry back softer. So I'm going to rinse out my brush, and I'm going to go ahead and add in just a little bit more of a blue shade. And this one's right next to, I don't want to say right next on the color palette of this blue, but it is just a hint darker, and it has more of a cloudy blue color to it. So I'm just going to add in that just sporadically, not covering everything, just a little bit here or there. And then I'm going back in with my favorite blue. And I'm going to actually make it a little bit darker because, like I said, this color is going to fade back when it dries. And I don't know what it is for me. I don't know how many of you guys watercolor, but I love watercoloring. To me, it's like a very forgiving process, and it just relaxes me. It totally relaxes me. So now I'm going to come in with a paper towel, and everything that was embossed, I'm just going to make sure I clean off before I bring in my heat gun. Before I start drying this, I just want to make sure that I get my watercolor paint off of, because sometimes it can kind of stick and melt into the heat embossing process. It can melt back into your embossing powder, and I don't want that. So I'm just going to clean up some of my areas before I start heat setting my color into my paper. So that looks good. I took up some of the color as well with my paper towel, so it really does make it look like clouds. And now I'm going to go ahead and heat set this. And you'll see once it's done that the color really does dry back a lot, and it ends up to be a very, very pretty blue. So while that dries, I'm going to go ahead and speed through this process. But here it is done. And doesn't that look so pretty? Now I'm going to grab my favorite pink. This is my favorite hot pink out of my palette. And I'm going to go into the area that I intentionally missed and add in some of that gorgeous pink, because I want to make it look like my heart is exploding with color. So I'm going to really work in that pink, and I'm actually going to let it sit right on top of that embossing powder. And I'm going to move it around and let it sit so it kind of looks like my heart is like exploding. My little heart balloon is exploding with color. And I'm not going to dry this back at all. I'm actually going to heat set it onto the balloon. Because like I said, when you don't remove the color off of the embossing powder, it will actually stick and stay it will dry back into the embossing powder. And that's exactly what I want this to do. I want it to dry back into that embossing powder. So I'm going to go ahead and heat set it. And once it's done, you guys. It's not going to come up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And it kind of makes it look like my little balloon is like popping open with color. And I absolutely love just having this really sharp pop of color on this. Now, since that's set back and dried, I wanted this to be a little bit more intense. So I'm going in with some more of that pink and just dabbing it on again. I'm adding a little bit more right into the embossed areas as well. And then I'm going to heat set this one more time and let that color actually stick to that embossing powder. Now, since that's all done, I'm going to go ahead and pull back my tape. And look how pretty that looks. I absolutely love the softness of this card. I thought during this card series, I wanted to do a little bit of watercoloring. And I wanted a card that was going to be really, really soft. And I think I achieved it on this one here. So look how pretty that looks. I just really, really love just that vibrant pop of that pink. So now we're going to go ahead and finish up the card. I went ahead and put in my sentiment and the ribbon that goes around the bottom of the balloon. And I'm going to go ahead and use my Versamark, my VersaFine Onyx Black ink to go ahead and stamp down the string and the sentiment. Now with this string, obviously I'm stamping over the embossed area. So of course it's not really going to take, but I have a fix for that. I'm just going to stamp this one more time because I really want this to be intense on my card panel. That looks perfect. Now, like I said, that little area right over the balloon is not going to stamp because it's going over the embossed area. But all I'm going to do is grab a Sharpie, a fine tip Sharpie, and then I can just finish drawing in my line. And then that totally fixes that problem. All done. So now we're going to go ahead and finish up the card. I'm going to use a Nina Solar White 110 pound. You guys know me. And I'm going to leave that white border all the way around because I like that it's watercolored. And since I went ahead and taped it off pretty well, I think I'm going to leave it there instead of trimming down the card panel. Now all I have to do is grab my ATG gun. And this card, you guys, has come together rather quickly today. And I'm just going to make sure I put a good enough amount of adhesive on the back. Now this paper didn't bow too much, so I was really happy about that. I'm not going to add anything else to this card. I'm going to keep this one really, really simple. And that is it, you guys. That is card number 4 in this series. I can't believe that we're almost to the end on this one. All right, you guys, that is a wrap. I hope you guys like this process. Please feel free to give me a thumbs up. Here is the card totally done. More pictures are over on my blog. I will link everything below. Thank you guys. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next card video soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.